Hi, this is Talie Warulkar. We are joined here today with Suzy Weiss, who's going to tell us the story of how anxiety has affected her life as part of my project to take that shame and taboo lid off of anxiety. Hi, Suzy. Do you want to tell us a
Hi.
little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I'm originally from London, grew up there, knew
Yay!
Talie back when. Went to, grew up, went to the standard Jewish schools. At some point, well, always felt a little bit disillusioned in London, sort of, as much as it was my home,
Yeah.
I always felt a bit out of place. I was sort of the girl who asked a lot of questions. My environment and eventually made it to Israel
Yay.
at the age of 25, 26, got married. So met my husband and, we made Aliyah, got engaged at the same time, got married 2 months later,
Wow.
and then kind of woke up the next morning in Jerusalem going, what have I done? Wait a minute, I don't understand the word of the
I actually
language. And like,
remember
what am
your
I doing here?
engagement.
Oh, wow.
I actually
Yeah,
remember
I
your
bet you
engagement.
remember
It's
that.
really funny. Yeah.
Wow. So yeah, that's now 14 years ago. And
Okay.
then that's it. And then built my family here. So now living here for 14 years, 5 kids.
And where do you live?
And we live in a place called Nofei Nechemia,
Yeah.
which everyone's going to go, where's that? Because even
Where's that?
Israelis don't know where it is. So anyone who's heard of Ariel, which they might have, which is sort of the end of like Fish Hamesh on Road
Mhm.
5, we're 2 minutes from there. So it's basically a hilltop with a lot of kids and nothing much else. So it's a great life for kids, like freedom for them. It's extremely boring. If you didn't have kids, like there'd be no reason to be here, but it really is like a lovely life for the kids. And we live, 2 minutes from Ariel, which really does have everything that you need. So yeah, it's been quite a journey, and that's where I am today. So
Wonderful. Okay, Suzy, tell me, what is your earliest memory of anxiety?
I was trying to think about this, and as you know, I was saying to you before that I have rubbish. I have a rubbish memory of my childhood.
Right.
So the first one that I think I can identify as anxiety, and not just sort of like maybe teenage angst or sort of
Anger.
hating the world and anger and
Hate my parents.
disillusionment, hate my
Yeah.
parents and hate everyone and so there
Yeah.
was definitely that, but I wouldn't have classified that or framed it or understood anxiety back then.
Mm.
Um, was probably when I was so I started my career in England,
Yeah.
and I was working in quite a high pace media company, where I was doing sort of media sales. So it was a very much moved away from the Jewish world at that point in my life.
How old were you?
I was, I think 19 when I started there. So I had this plan, I'm going to finish school and go to university. And instead I kind of took a break, ended up in this job, somehow taught myself into it because I was the only one that didn't have a degree that actually got into this job, didn't
Yeah.
really know what I was doing, and somehow really fell into it in quite an amazing way, to the point that I kind of rose up the ranks and I became a manager there. And at the age of sort of 21, where everyone else around me was sort of 26 and above, I was sort of on the fast track to success. So on the surface of things, it looked really good. But there was the other side of it, which was very unhealthy, this sort of lifestyle of work hard, play hard.
Yeah.
I'm hanging out with all these, it's kind of work really hard, very English, go to the pub afterwards, drink yourself a bit silly, and then
Yeah.
stumble home at 2 a.m. from central London. So it was a lot of that, and then kind of curse that you did it and say, I'm never going to do that again.
And then do it again the next night.
And then do it
Right.
again the next day. So there was a lot of that. And with that also came, I would say that's probably the earliest time I identified anxiety, where
Could you
I think
actually
due
label it
to,
as anxiety? Did you recognize
no,
it? Like, fine. So what were you
no,
feeling? What were you
I was,
experiencing at the time?
so I remember sometimes this is where I remember, and I say that was anxiety, even though I didn't understand it then, I think, where I'd have like on a Sunday night, this panic inside, like real, which now I understand that panic and I understand
Anxiety.
that feeling. But it was this feeling of sort of everything clamping in, and feeling like you can't cope, feeling that this pure fear, like fear as if someone is about to come and stab me or something.
That's
but
literally
nothing was
anxiety.
happening. Right,
Yeah.
it is. It's sort of, it's on one hand, it's like an adrenaline. So there is this adrenaline that drives you, but in a very unhealthy way. And I'm very familiar with that adrenaline. But then there was a flip side to the adrenaline, which was it's pure panic, like a real feeling of pure panic, as if someone was coming at me to stab me or something like that. So I do remember that feeling on a Sunday night.
Flight or freeze. Flight,
exactly.
freeze.
Yeah, absolutely. And I remember that feeling on a Sunday. I was like, I can't go in tomorrow. I can't. And I'm sure it stemmed from a number of things. I was also I was in a relationship at the time, and it was a very unhealthy relationship. And, I was living this life that I wasn't giving myself an opportunity to just be or breathe or catch myself. It was just too much on the go, and too much, and not taking time to absorb that. So I definitely remember it. I didn't do anything about it at the time. In fact, it got to the point where at the same period of time, I got quite sick. And I'm sure I got quite sick because of the lifestyle, the unhealthy.
I'm still here. Yeah. I froze, but I'm still
here.
Froze? I froze, but I'm still here. Okay, go on.
So I got quite sick.
Yeah. And you were 21, yeah?
I was 21, yeah. And I kind of burnt myself out at 21. I was feeling quite ill. I was getting these horrible attacks, and it's interesting because when we talk about anxiety, I was getting real pain. Where I went to the doctor, not a good doctor, who actually retired soon after this, which is good, who kept saying to me, yeah, this is all in your head. This is just anxiety. So this is a flip side where
anxiety's in your head.
It is all in your head.
In anxiety.
It is, right. But this wasn't. In this case, it wasn't. So, I was suffering real attacks. Like I'd get to the point where I was in so much pain, I'd have to be, taken home from being out in the evening. And it got to the point that it was going on for so long. And of course, the doctor never at any point said, well, let's do a CT scan or something.
Yeah.
Right. So it got to the point where I was so sick one evening. I was out with a friend in London and had to get an ambulance to the hospital.
Oh my gosh.
They finally then said, I think there's something wrong here. And they did tests, and I had gallstones everywhere. So my body produced essentially stones. But again, I think if you look at it, it all came from,
the mind.
It all came from that stress, without doubt. And I ended up, pretty sick with it. I had to have 2 operations to get all the stones out my body. I had quite a long road to recover, and it actually took a big turn. My life really took a big turn at that point, where I said, okay, I need to stop and I need to rethink where I am and what I'm doing, which really led to sort of the next phase, the next phase of my life, which included sort of Israel and India and other things, and a lot of healing. You've frozen again.
Okay, I'm still here, everyone. Half closed eyes. Yeah. Wonderful. I look nice. Go on. So
So
and was that point, like a healing experience for you afterwards?
Yes, it was I have to stop experience. It was a real eye-opener of, I need to stop this lifestyle.
Can I just go back?
Isn't doing me well.
Can I just go back to something that you said? Did you realize at the time that this was anxiety?
I wouldn't have framed it as that, but I definitely realized that I was out of sync, that I was suffering from, overload, and I lost where I was. I lost my base. I lost my groundedness, if that's the right word. And it was clear to me that I needed to kind of reconnect with my roots.
Right.
I needed to really understand who I am and where I am and what I want. I became very disillusioned, I think, with a world that, as much as, don't get me wrong, I had great friends and I had a great time, it felt that it lacked that substance. And maybe that comes into also the whole Jewish thing. But not just that, also just, connecting that soul element of myself and that drive to want meaning. That's what was lacking. And I think if I look back at times in my life where I felt most anxious, maybe from that point, are times where I've lost that basis and that sense of meaning. So that sense of purpose, who I am.
You're talking about like your alignment with your inner self?
Yeah, very much
Yeah.
so. So you could call that religion, you could call that a sense of self and consciousness, you could call that many things, and I think many of those things mean the same. But definitely that when I felt out of alignment, or things in my life have pushed me out of sync, where I haven't been able to catch myself in a certain way, it's definitely led me to feel that overload, and that overload has caused a lot of that adrenaline and the flip turn of that, so that panic.
Anxiety,
So
essentially. Yeah.
yeah, anxiety, exactly, anxiety. So again, I framed it probably in different words over the years, but
Yeah.
we can definitely call it anxiety without a doubt. But yeah, so I guess after that was the journey of,
So you
there was
said
a real
you
journey of
went to
healing.
India. Okay.
First of all, I went to Israel.
Okay.
I said, okay, I need to go back to my roots. I have a lot of questions that I feel that I'd moved away a lot from the Jewish community and that, that upbringing.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, I need to get back to that. I need to get back to sort of my people. And
Yeah.
I went to Israel really just with the idea of, I'm going to spend a few weeks, and
How old were you at this stage?
22, I think, 21,
22.
22. So still
Yeah.
quite young, if you look at it in the
I
time
think this is when
frame.
we our path. Yeah, I think this is when our paths crossed. I'm just remembering now. I
Yeah,
used to. I was.
it very much so.
Yeah.
I ended up, so I said to one of my good friends, I said, listen, I've got questions that never really got answered, because I was the girl who I used to go to synagogue when I was little with my parents
Yeah.
every week.
Yeah.
And I remember when I was 12, I went to synagogue and I started, the age you start asking questions. And
Yeah.
I said, why am I coming here? And I think I went to the rabbi, I can't remember. And the answer it wasn't enough for me. There wasn't a
Yeah.
good enough reason. I think it was one of those answers of, like, this is what we do, which, doesn't work at some point.
It doesn't
You
work.
need to
Yeah.
hear more than that. So I said, well, then why am I doing this? And I kind of just stopped. So
Yeah.
I kind of, from that point onwards, I was very detached from anything Jewish,
Yeah.
really, even though I was living in the Jewish society and I was sort of, in a Jewish school.
So that you came back to Israel. You came to
It was a
Israel.
real need. Not just Israel, but Hanof. So seminary,
Oh, you were in Neve.
hardcore.
I
I
remember.
was in the Yerushalayim. Yeah, yeah.
And did you find
So
that
it was
helped with your? Did you find that helped with the anxiety at all?
well, something funny actually, because there was,
Yeah.
I don't know if you know that there's this, and I don't know what the politically correct word to say other than mental institution down the end of the
Yes,
road.
by Gabachol, right at the entrance. I
Yeah.
remember that.
And I had a
Yes.
really unfortunate experience where a friend at the time ended up in there. So I had the unfortunate experience of seeing it from the inside. But it was interesting because I remember at the time saying that there is an interesting comparison of, this gated, beautiful looking, with beautiful looking scenery on the outside where you're sort of gated in and,
Yeah.
and there was something very similar about the look of it. But the experience was at the time fantastic for me. As I said, I was meant to be there for 6 weeks and I ended up just staying for a year.
I remember that. It's so funny.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was a trip, and it was fascinating. And it was a lot of adventure. I met the most unbelievable people.
Mm.
Of course, though, I took on,
Great
I
friends.
then said,
Yay.
yeah. And I, at the same time, I was like, that's it. Found the truth. I was one of those. I found the truth. I know everything. It's quite sickening when I look back at myself. So I apologize to my former self and to the people that knew me then of that arrogance and yeah. and
yeah.
and I sort of just I really absorbed myself into that environment and that world and cut off a lot of that outside. And on one hand, that did me a lot of good because it gave me a lot of time. I was writing a lot and I was reflecting a lot and I was learning a lot and I was experiencing a lot, really just discussions all day. And
how did that help with the anxiety?
A lot. Also the physical healing and the emotional healing. The writing did a lot for me. The conversations that I was having that were so filled with that meaning and search did a huge amount for me. And just I think this being in Israel as well, it was the first time I'd been here on holiday before, but I'd never really experienced living. I wouldn't say necessarily that was living in Israel, but it was definitely an experience of that. And it gave me a huge amount. I got much better. I felt better. I felt more clear in my head. I felt more connected. I felt a sense of alignment in myself again. Of course, though, you know, I was always a bit more of an extreme person, so I probably took that too far
Yeah.
out of, you know, which pushed me again out of that alignment. And I
Yeah.
think what I saw is I noticed myself, and this was the first time I think I was noticing myself as it was happening. So this was already positive,
Yeah.
where I'd started to go. I remember going to Jerusalem, and I'd going to these crazy Kabbalistic rabbis, and kind of just going on their trip and hearing them speak and really getting off on all that sort of Kabbalah stuff. And I do remember that I couldn't sleep, and I got to a point where I couldn't sleep at night because my mind was buzzing to such an extent that I would have to be getting up and writing down my thoughts in the middle of the night. And I got to the point where that anxiety was starting again.
So it sounded like
again,
you flipped over to the other side.
Yeah. I flipped over to the other side because I immersed myself too much in it, as opposed to saying, which I think being older now, I can say, I'm in an experience which is giving to me, but that doesn't mean it's everything. So you can take something from it without immersing yourself fully in it. And which I think is a healthier approach to the all or nothing. So instead of saying, you know, this is it, this is everything, I have to be fully immersed, say, I'm taking, there's good from this that I'm taking.
That comes with age.
Slowly. And that does come with age and experience.
Yeah. Sometimes you need to like experience what is the boundary and what like the extreme is, the like to go to extreme so that you can like bounce back to like a healthy, something that's healthy for you, but you don't know what that is until you experience it, whatever the
absolutely
thing is, you know.
Yeah, so it was sort of what I did was one extreme to the other, as opposed to, so I kind of let go of the past and discover something new. And I tried to say, oh, but all of that doesn't matter anymore, and obviously that can't work.
You can't do that because it's still part of your life. Yeah,
definitely. So after a year in Israel, where I think I'd managed to find some sort of center, I came back to England, and it was clear to me that I'd lost something in myself at that point. It was clear to me that I'd lost my sense of laughter a bit. Everything had become too serious and too difficult, and that wasn't how it was meant to be. So I guess then it stemmed another journey, which took me to a different type of healing, I guess, in India.
This is India. Right.
This is India. And I just want to say, I didn't go to India at the time because everyone's like, oh, India. I didn't go there to look for myself. I knew where I was. So it wasn't about finding myself. I went there because I still felt unaligned. I still felt this, you know, I'd immersed myself. I was immersed on one side, I was then immersed on the other side of things. And now I needed to find out, how do I bring those two together? So there was also a physical part of that healing.
Yeah. When you went to India, I think I remember you went to Goa, didn't you? Was it Goa?
I started off in Mumbai in a healing center where where I spent a month, I think it was a month and a half or 2 months, having lots of very funky curry treatments and taking lots of strange curry-like pills. Yeah. And eating mung bean cake and
mung bean cake.
Yeah, they actually made it. I just remember because they made that for my birthday because the diet was so strict, and you know, you're having like mung beans for breakfast and lunch and dinner. That's basically what we lived on. And they made they wanted to make me a cake for my birthday in the center, and they made me a mung bean cake, which actually almost tasted like a cake. So I was quite impressed.
That's really funny.
But I remember that, and I remember that a lot came up there. There was a lot of anxiety there, but in a healthy way.
Let's talk about that.
Yeah.
What do you mean by healthy way?
And I explain what I mean by healthy way, that I think through the cleansing and the intensity of the treatment, and I'll just reframe it. Why did I go? One of the main reasons I went there is the gallstones that I had originally had come back a couple of times. So it was something that obviously there was a weakness in my body, and it wasn't getting healed. And I really did believe that, you know, the answer is not going to be to just keep having operations to get these gallstones out. There's got to be a more holistic way of healing this. And that's how I somehow found out about this Ayurvedic center in India, and dragged one of my friends with me and went there on this healing journey. And why was there a lot of anxiety? Because all of these treatments that you were having, they were cleansing the physical ailments, I guess. But then with all that is all the mental all the stuff that you've carried in the body that needed to also come out. So there were points, and imagine you're enclosed with lots of people who are going through a lot of stuff, people that go there who had a lot more serious sort of physical and mental issues than I did. Speaking to them and seeing and being very absorbed in that sort of place, it was fascinating, and it was a journey I learned so much from. At the same time, it brought up so much, and there were definitely times where I felt like I was so enclosed I was going to explode, and that anxiety came up a lot. And the reason I say it was in a healthy way, that I think what I was noticing it, I was aware of it, and I was processing it. It was coming out because it had to come out to get better, and I was processing it and letting it go. And that was where
did you have someone to process it with? Like, how did you process it?
So my friend who was there, Anna, who I'm sure
I know.
you remember.
I do remember.
So hi Anna, if you happen to see this at all, because unfortunately we're not so in contact anymore, but I would love to.
I remember you went with her.
Yeah, so we spoke a lot. It wasn't that there was a particular therapist there or something, but the conversations, there were a lot of conversations with the other people there, these are people from all walks of life, and it was quite beautiful because all of them were there to heal, so all of them were very open to those more in-depth conversations about who, you know, not just like, hi, how are you, how's the weather? It was really straight to the point. It was, very where British, are you today? There wasn't any of that Britishness there. It was, where are you today? What's coming up in you? These sorts of questions, which for me, and in any case, these are the questions that have always really been more interesting for me. If I meet someone, I want to understand their essence better. I want to be able to connect on that level. So for me, it was wonderful, but it was hard. So after about 2 months there, I came out full of mung beans and
mung bean cake,
mung bean cake, and then went and said, okay, I'm not going home yet, I need to go heal, like just kind of get away from that intensity, and then went off to Goa and did some whole, you know, meditation and what's it called, Reiki and all this other stuff in Goa with some crazy woman, and traveled and kind of just really had my own experience there, but an experience again that was a lot more healthy. Yes, I mean, tremendously. I remember I actually had a crazy experience. I remember there's a lot of crazy experiences there, but there was one experience where we were doing, I think it was some sort of meditation, and you know, because there's so many Israelis and whatever there was a book of Tehillim there, which was very sort of random, and I just remember sort of, you know, picking that up and going through it and just kind of bursting out into tears, and it kind of it felt like all this stuff was just coming out, and the healing from sort of, you know, the past relationship that was bad, and the healing from the pain that I'd had, and the healing from all that anxiety had just kind of, you know, I was just allowing it to be there, but go, and to be and go, and learning that language as well, I think really fully for the first time, to say it's okay. It's okay that I got it wrong. It's okay that I'm not perfect, because I think a lot of that anxiety also comes from that place, and you might have experienced that too, where we grew up and it wasn't okay to ask questions really, and it wasn't okay to not be to not know things, and to not be perfect, and to and I think that
there's a lot of pressure back then.
A lot of pressure,
just even like everything. It's like growing up as a woman in the 90s was very, very different. It was very like, you know, the ideal body type, and then peer pressure from the friends, and
totally. Like I remember
good little girl, sit in the corner, you know, be idle.
Totally. Yeah, it was funny because I had this memory of, you know, now I'm looking back at sort of my kids and starting to remember being their age. So I remember I was telling my 12-year-old, I remember going home, like I'd have to, you know, there's all the sort of pressure you get from school and that period. And I remember going home and, you know, I'd have to have my bag on one shoulder because it was just not cool to walk around with your bag on two shoulders, right? So I would kill myself because the bag was always too heavy. And this is central London to where I lived in northwest London. So it's an hour journey on the train and buses. I'd be carrying around the bag on one shoulder because if, God forbid, someone saw me with a bag.
Can't carry a bag on two shoulders in the 90s. Can't carry a bag on
two shoulders. And I remember, and I'd get to the turning of my road where I'd look around and I was like, okay, no one can see me now. And And then I would, I'd put it on too short, and I just felt this relief in my body. But it's so funny when you look back at that,
When you let go
that
of the
phase of me was,
anxiety of like carrying it on
yeah,
one shoulder.
yeah, and you just think, oh my gosh, that's how much peer pressure there was. And the funny thing is, like, what would have happened if I were on two? God knows if anything would have actually happened. But there was
When
this,
you're 15, you don't think that.
yeah,
Yeah. I
exactly.
obviously, I
So
wouldn't be surprised if we like, I mean, I've realized last year, I always thought my anxiety started when I was about 30, 31 when I had my first kid.
yeah,
And I realized
yeah, we haven't
last
got to
year
that.
through one of my coaches, actually, I think it came around when I was about 7 or 8. That's what I realized,
Yeah,
about
so
7. So we probably
wow,
did have anxiety as teenagers, but it wasn't as known. It wasn't like labeled like, okay,
it
this
wasn't
is
labeled.
anxiety. People knew about depression. I
Yeah,
definitely like, I didn't realize I was suffering from depression, but when I came out of it, people were like, oh yeah, that was depression much earlier, you
right,
know?
right.
Um, so I think the problem was is like there wasn't a label for anxiety in there. I mean, there probably was, but we
Yeah,
didn't label it as anxiety. Nobody told us like, right, this is anxiety. You just
yeah,
kind of like read,
absolutely.
you
It was
know?
definitely only I think later in life.
Yes.
Right. So when I
So when
started
did
having
you
kids,
realize like this
when
is
I realized,
anxiety? Yes.
so it's interesting because when you said about, after having kids, yeah, I had my first kid, I'd moved to Israel, new language, knew everything. My family's not here. A year and a bit after getting married, I have my first kid. And I did have a bit of a breakdown in that, for sure. And I
Okay.
think
How
if I
old were
look
you at this
back,
stage?
27. So I wasn't
Right.
that young, but
Okay.
well, I don't know, relatively.
In the grand
And
scheme of things, yeah.
in the grand scheme of things, it's not like I was, some 19 with my first kid and completely naive, but in a way I was completely naive, as maybe
Yes.
we all are, because who really understands what it's like to go
Yeah.
through that until you've gone through that?
Exactly.
Oh my gosh, they're going to let me go home with this baby from the hospital without some sort of manual, and I have to keep him alive. Like that's the most scary thing in the world.
It
Now,
is
I don't think I
scary.
would have labeled it as anxiety, but absolutely, I mean, that was a pure fear of, is he still breathing? What do I do? Why is he crying? The first baby type of fear of
Yeah.
everything scary. Without doubt, that set off, I think, anxiety that probably has never gone away. That fear, sense of my own sense of mortality, that I don't think I had before. I was much more careless with my life before then. That
Yeah.
sense of, there was this huge feeling of, I have so much responsibility for this person, that I have to keep them alive and I have to keep them okay. And I don't always know how to do that. And this feeling of it's so much of a weight on your shoulders
Did you
because
have
you
your
can't
family
barely,
around? You didn't have your family
no,
around either. You're on
no
your own.
family around, on my own. I had my husband's family, but not on a sort of daily basis. So it was very much this feeling of, okay, what do I do now? And how are they letting me actually, like, really
Yeah.
this feeling of like, are they really going to just leave me alone now? Isn't there, are they going to like send someone to come help me do this? This
Yeah.
whole, like, I guess, you need a village, and there wasn't a village. So it's like, where's
Village.
the village?
Yeah.
Where's the village? So that was it was hard. And I think I did have postnatal depression. I didn't know I
Right.
did. And it's only maybe years later, my husband said to me, I really think you had postnatal depression. I was like, I see that now. And I didn't,
Yeah.
again, I wouldn't even have labeled it, but I think it was such a shock to the system for me. And it felt so overwhelming, and the exhaustion, everything else that went with it. It was a hard transition with the first kid.
Do you think you
After
also
that,
might have
maybe,
had postpartum anxiety?
definitely, I wouldn't have, even now I don't know to necessarily to label it as that. I think maybe if we jump forward, the first time I really started labeling anxiety was after my mum died. So definitely I think I had it throughout having the kids, without doubt.
Yeah.
With each kid that came more sense, more of a sense of my mortality, more of, fear. That fear came up a lot, and that
Yeah.
fear very much was anxiety. But I do remember very distinctly, my mum died about 4 years ago, and it was the first time in my life that I'd felt absolutely shaken to my core. So what I said, I think back at the beginning about that sense of not feeling aligned, this for me was, it's literally taking the core of who you are, pulling it out, and everything was unaligned. So in that time, I had 3 kids at home as well, and I was working. And I remember I had to do I would travel in that job. So I would travel to different places for meetings and events. And not so long after my mum died, I remember going to Europe on a trip, and I had to drive around Europe. And I had this moment where I was on the road. I can't remember which country, maybe in Belgium. And my whole body went into panic, to the point where I thought, I don't know where I'm driving, what side of the road am I in, what's happening. I couldn't breathe. I was, heart palpitation, complete panic attack. And I remember just feeling the rest of that trip, I somehow got through it. But just such a clear sense of panic and anxiety, such a clear sense of it. And the thing
did you realize
me,
like this is it?
Yeah.
Did you realize you're having a panic attack?
Yes, I did. I realized it, and I realized I was suffering a tremendous amount of anxiety because I felt unhinged. I also realized it was because I think everything in me needed to just be grounded and safe after my mum died. And going out there was just too much. It was scary. I was out there in the world, but I felt that no, I need to be safe and at home. I need to find a sense of security, and I'd lost that sense of security that I then needed to rebuild. And it was very hard.
Do you think that was triggered by the passing of your mother, or what?
I think it was triggered by the passing of my mother. I remember after she died, I got there, and I mean, I don't think I have time to go through it. It was a crazy story in itself. I managed to get there somehow. I think she waited for me. I was back and forth. She was sick for a few weeks, and I was back and forth to England from Israel. And I got there about 4 hours before she died, and my brother picked me up from the airport, and he said, she's waiting for you. And I knew she was, and I got there, and I got to be with her when she died. And I think on one hand, I'm extremely grateful I was there with her. On the other hand, it was traumatic, and it shook me, and I couldn't get that image of that out of me. And I remember at the funeral, my cousin, who's much older than me, that lost her mum about a year before, she had just really incredible advice that stuck with me to today. To just breathe. And for me, I just remember, because I couldn't breathe, and I didn't realize I wasn't breathing. I did know I had anxiety. I did know I was out of sync entirely. I knew all of that, but I couldn't breathe. And that's often how it still feels today when I get anxious. I have to remember to breathe. And so it's really stuck with me. And I think it got me through the grieving period at the beginning, which felt so, on a physical and emotional level, just so heavy. Just, okay, breathe. And I think that's how I was able to survive it. And it seems like such an almost ridiculous, simple thing. But it's kind of what she said to me. She goes, that's all you can do right now. Just breathe deeply. And sort of gave me this really warm hug. And it felt just really absorbing, and it just helped me get through that whole time. Just being with myself and that breath, feeling when it all got too much, remember, I'm here, it's okay, and just breathe. And that was huge, and it's still, I think, big for me today.
It brings you into the present.
Brings you into the present, and
instead of
like
being
you get
in your
carried
heart,
away with the story.
Instead of being in your head or your heart, go into your lungs.
Because it's the story in your head that makes things anxious. It's not the present. The present can be whatever's happening, and someone else could be experiencing the same present and absolutely fine. Like, I see my husband, he doesn't get anxious, and he experiences a lot of the same things I do. So it's not about the reality of what's happening, it's about how you interpret it. And I have to remind myself of that. I don't always catch myself to remind myself of that. But it's a huge thing, just stopping and breathing, and just being where you are for a moment, if you can catch that, I think.
To bring yourself into the present.
It's so important. Because the reality is, most of the time, there's nothing that's happening. It's just me in my head that's creating a story around it, that's pulling out all that fear.
That's exactly what anxiety is.
And then, of course, more kids, Corona. So I had my 4th kid. I had a year and 3 months before Corona hit, and my 5th and last kid, my little girl, was born 2 weeks before Corona hit.
Wow.
And that was another level. It was another,
Wow.
like I kind of worked through the grief of my mum. I'd worked through a lot of other stuff. I was probably a bit more stable at that point.
This was 2 years after your mother passed away as well.
It was 2 years after my mum passed away. So I was in a better place. And, I wasn't going through that initial grief. It was a different type of grief that was less intense. And I'd become more aligned in a lot of ways. I'd worked on that. I did do some therapy. It helped a bit. Just sort of reminding myself, when that fear comes up, asking myself, am I actually in danger right now? Just even asking myself, am I actually in danger right now? And then remembering, oh, I'm not. Okay. But I was, but then, I gave birth to my fifth kid, and I was kind of anyway a bit nervous and a bit overwhelmed with the idea of having this fifth kid, especially so close to the fourth and then the older kids. And then, of course, I go to the hospital, and we didn't even really know. We'd heard about Corona, but it was still sort of in China.
Yeah.
And the hospital was already overpacked because people didn't want to be in. I was in Tel Ashoma, and people didn't want to be in Ichilov because they'd opened a Corona ward. And I was like, well, what's that? What's going on? This is 2 weeks before the first Sega. So,
it was before Purim, yeah.
Just for Purim. So I give birth. My husband had just started a brand new job, and he was sort of very stressed and really trying to learn everything. And he had to do that from home, which was, the added stress of trying to learn a new job from home. And I had all the kids at home and a new baby. And it was just, survival mode,
Completely.
survival mode, because there was no other way to do it.
Yeah.
But without doubt, the level of anxiety that from then has come about as it's really enhanced it. Yeah, without doubt. Corona's really intensified all the fear, oh my God, what do I do? And do I,
the last 2 years, woof, yeah.
The last 2 years,
especially in children,
so hard. How do I protect them at the beginning? Because you didn't know, like, it's just, you feel like, if I step outside, if I touch anything,
it is the
unknown. And the
like
fear,
the line is outside. Yeah,
exactly. The fear of it all, the media. And I realized I had to stop looking at the news, because I couldn't sleep at night. It was causing me panic attacks all the time. And I had the new baby, and I'm scared for her, because I'm thinking, oh my God, what happens if she gets it? And if one of the other kids bring it home? And just the intensity of us all being locked in, for me, feeling locked in creates a lot of anxiety. I hate it. I need to be able to get out. Yeah. It's very hard for me, and it really felt like I was trapped inside, and that was tough.
Do you have a balcony or a garden?
Yeah, thank God. What saved us is we have a garden. One of the benefits of living in a mountaintop in the middle of nowhere is at least we have a nice garden, and we had like a trampoline in the garden. I bought like swings on the pergola, and so we had that, and that was really a savior when the kids could just go outside and play, and there was sunshine. But I think even to this day, it's, as much as I don't have the same fear necessarily around Corona, the whole period of time, that's sort of what it's done emotionally to me, and I see what it's done to the kids and their education and everything else. It's really tough.
Yes,
it's really tough.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So yeah.
What is it you did to help yourself?
I think at the beginning, especially in the beginning, in the first Sega, nothing. It was pure survival mode.
Right.
I wasn't doing it. I just was on autopilot, because it's the only way I could I could digest what was going on.
Yeah.
Since then, I did go to someone for a short period of time to sort of try and help me frame in my head better how I'm looking at things, and that was great.
Did the person give you like techniques? Like,
yeah, I think it's about whenever you're feeling unaligned, and you're feeling that something's coming up, and you're not feeling it sync with what's going on around you, it's about stopping and assessing it. It's asking yourself those questions, well,
breathing,
what's happening? Breathing, first of all, breathing. That's always something.
Breathe slow and deep.
That's always something I remind myself. And then it's asking yourself, like, what's actually happening, separating it out. What's happening? What am I feeling? What am I thinking? Where am I feeling it in my body? So sometimes today, I think the difficulty I have today is just life is so but both me and my husband work full time, very full time, and it's been more seges and more, so I feel that we're still, there's, to some extent, I'm back in this autopilot a bit, just because there's so much to digest between the house and the laundry and the kids and work and everything. So there is a lot of adrenaline that goes into that, and that adrenaline has that very unhealthy turn to it. So it can definitely be hard to catch it. And I do find myself sometimes at night and I just can't sleep, and I know then I'm in an unhealthy place. But those lessons help when I remember to catch them and I remember to breathe. They help a lot because they're there, and I can witness it a lot better today than, let's say, I could have years ago. So that obviously makes a big difference too. So it's those sorts of techniques. I do feel that, maybe that it would be nice if there was more of those sort of support groups. I don't know how they would work. Yeah. And I don't know. What do you mean by
support groups?
Sort of, maybe, I don't know, groups of people that sort of are going through things as well, and when it's feeling hard. I do have the friends I go to when it's feeling hard.
You're talking about like an anxiety support group?
Maybe, maybe something like that. Sort of feeling that, when you're, although I don't know, when you're in that, you're much less likely to reach out, because that's the tendency. When you're feeling low or you're feeling anxious, people don't reach out. But to digest that a bit better,
it's quite ironic that, like, in order to deal with anxiety, it triggers anxiety.
Exactly, it triggers anxiety because I have to put myself out there. And then, even today I'm saying, oh, it's so against my Britishness to do this conversation. It's so against everything that I grew up with. You don't lay your dirty laundry on the line, sort of thing. And why am I talking out loud about things that are so personal?
Is it dirty laundry?
But it's not. But on the other hand, it's like, what's more real than this?
But it's not dirty laundry. It's cleaning the dirty laundry.
It's cleaning. Yeah,
it's making it clean.
And I agree. And I think it's, if I can help other people feel comfortable with coming out and talking and feeling like they're okay, that they don't feel great sometimes, and that it's tough, and that sometimes it's more than just sometimes, and sometimes they feel they can't cope, and sometimes they feel that it's all too much, because it is too much sometimes. If you look at our generation, especially, I look here in Israel, you've got a lot of people living here without family, where you have the pressures of no village. There's no village. Where is the village? Bring the village. No support. Expectations are so high. You've got to work and you've got to make money, and you've got to, and the mortgage and the kids, and especially at our stage of life where, a lot of people in our situation here might have a number of kids. They've got all the financial pressure on themselves. They don't necessarily have any family support, and they're trying to navigate their kids growing up and all the emotional stuff that comes along with that, where they're triggering lots of things from within yourself. And
be kind to yourself. Be kind
to yourself.
Lower your
expectations.
Something
that I struggle with. I struggle with being kind to myself and lowering expectations. I'm the first person to criticize myself.
So, Suzy, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
How can you be kind to yourself?
So I think, first of all, by just remembering that we're not meant to be perfect, and that it's okay, and that some days it's also just okay not to achieve. It's okay. Like, for me, it's always been really hard. Like, if I just sit there and do nothing all day, I feel like, well, what have I done with my life? I've wasted my life away. So it's getting away from that.
Being kind to yourself.
Being kind to myself. And it's allowing myself to just be okay with myself, allowing that. And that's still a struggle, because there's still that very dominant voice in my head that says, no, but you must do this and you must do that, or you're not okay. And so I have to remind, it's something I have to remind myself.
What benefit do you get from being kind to yourself, from remembering that, it's okay? From realigning yourself, what benefit do you get from that?
That I feel a sense of calm. I feel a sense of calm, and I feel a sense of looking outward and not inward. Because the problem with anxiety and everything that goes around that is you're focused inward, and when you're focused too much inward, you get more and more enclosed in that, and that's not a healthy place. So it's remembering to focus outward. Think about someone else, do something else, reach out to someone else, and remember that. And the minute you're sort of focusing more outward, your world expands, and your ability to see things in a sort of broader perspective changes as well. So that's why the flip side, it's difficult, because on one hand, when you're feeling depressed or anxious or any of those things, you kind of want to stay enclosed. It's scary. You don't want to go anywhere. It all feels too much. And it's actually in that moment, the best thing you can do for yourself is reach out, is go out,
And
be out.
Yeah, but also you said before, you said that like when you're kind to yourself, you can be calm. And
Yes.
inner
Yeah.
calmness and peace is literally like the antidote to anxiety.
Yeah. Oh, completely. It's completely the
So always
antidote,
ask
because
yourself, how can I be calm in this moment? How can I be kind to
yeah,
myself?
right. And
Definitely.
when it feels too much, just say, you know, okay, even to say right now it feels too much, and that's okay.
Yeah.
As in, just that message of it's okay is, I think, very, at least for me, that's quite, you know, that helps a lot, to say it's okay. All right, so I messed up in something today, so I wasn't perfect and I shouted at my kid, or I, you know, I wasn't a great mother today, and I wasn't great at work today, and I screwed up in something and I didn't get that done. Okay,
To know your
so
anxiety
tomorrow I'll try.
triggers. To know your
Yeah,
anxiety triggers.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of them. There are a lot of them, because there's
But
a
to
lot of
know them,
things in life.
sometimes if
Yeah,
we know them, that's the first step in helping
yeah,
oneself. Yeah.
yeah,
Um,
definitely. That
what are
awareness
you?
is really, really important.
Huge, definitely. Is there anything specific that you're doing today to help yourself?
Um, Probably not enough. Because like I said, I feel like just the day is filled with so much. I feel like it just I have no time, like
Okay.
physically just don't have time for things.
Yeah.
On the other hand, the work is much more trying to catch it if and when it comes up, and breathe through it, take a minute, step back, and say, okay, I'm going to step outside now, I'm going to do something else, not to let myself sink into it too much. So the work is probably, you know, comes from a lot of the years of learning things and speaking to people, and, you know, that whole journey, and knowing from experience that I don't have to be in this place, knowing from experience that I can come out of it, because I
Is there
have
something that you can
experience
do
coming out
to
of it.
prevent yourself from even reaching that place?
If I'm able to catch myself when, you know, before it gets too much, then
How about
yeah,
like
then I can.
before? So as opposed to like having to do the
So those
catching, can you
practices.
do a
So
preventative?
right. So I do know that, let's say, which I haven't done, and I keep telling myself I should go back to things like writing and yoga and all those things, you know, that are very much about kind of bringing in the, you know, being in the present moment, was so helpful. It's something I'd like to get back to, because I haven't incorporated that back into my life since Corona. Um,
Yeah.
I think I'm still coming out of that survival mode. I'm still not fully out of the survival mode. And although I feel relatively stable, I see that definitely there's a lot of energy in my body, that anxious energy, that needs a better outlet. And it can be addictive. That's also the problem. The anxious energy can be very addictive, because it's like adrenaline. And you kind of can go all day on it until the point where you get overwhelmed with that adrenaline, because it's not a healthy energy.
Yeah,
So
it's counterproductive. Yeah.
yeah, it's good for a while, just like coffee gives you that, you know, the caffeine buzz, but then you're going to have that come down. So yeah, I've already
Literally a
had enough.
jog. Yeah.
Yeah. I know my one from earlier is not much.
Okay.
So yeah, so I guess that's another thing for
Yeah.
anxiety. Lots of coffee. Oh, English chocolate. It sounds silly, and
Oh,
maybe it's also being English.
Cadbury's.
Cadbury's and a nice cup of Tetley tea. Like
Oh,
my
no,
mum.
but
I
PG
remember my
tips.
mum. It
PG
could be.
tips.
I don't really care. I'm not so fussy anymore, because I'm like, if it's English tea, I'm okay. And I remember my mum, like, whenever things got hard for her, or we had a hard day, or she had a hard day, oh, let's just sit down and have a cup of tea. And you know what's funny is, as much as kind
With the
of I
milk.
laugh on that one level,
Yeah.
there was something almost therapeutic about it, because you say, I'm now going to step out of where I was, and
Yeah.
I'm going to sit down and just have a cup of tea. And there's something almost today, when I look at it, it's like when I drink tea, there's so much comfort in it. And I think because the place of drinking tea was always a place of, it's okay, just
A
have a cup
positive
of tea.
association.
Yeah,
It's a positive
yeah,
association. Yeah,
yeah,
it's taking that time to sit down and drink your hot drink, tea or coffee,
yeah,
hot,
yeah.
not warm,
Hot,
not
not warm.
lukewarm,
Oh my gosh,
definitely not
no,
cold.
no.
And no, you
I
don't
still, I still in
warm up
Israel,
in the microwave.
when I go to any coffee shop, you know, I'm still like hot. It needs to be
Hot.
strong and it needs to be hot. Do not give me lukewarm drinks, because they're very big on lukewarm drinks here and I can't deal with that. So yeah, and I guess it's also going back to those things of, you know, what you know, maybe what image or what memory gave me comfort. Can I go back to that? Can I
that those help you?
Yeah, they do. It's finding one that's strong enough that you can sort of get there emotionally as well, not just mentally. I can get back to that place emotionally, like that comfort of just having my mum's cuddle and telling me I'm okay. Things like that, especially I think when you don't have your mum, they're big memories to go back to. So that can be quite anchoring. But yeah, it's, look, I won't say, oh wow, I'm great and I'm healed and I never get anxious. Definitely not. And I think that's the point. It's okay. I'm not. There's definitely a journey. There's a journey of self-discovery. There's a journey of self. It doesn't end. And if anything, I've learned, I know much less than I think I knew many years ago. I don't pretend to know very much at all today, or have some idea that I, you know, the only thing I try to have a real sense of is where I am right now and who I want to be in this moment.
Being in the present.
Yeah. Beyond that, I think is just, you know, we're just messing with our heads to try and believe that we have control over so much more. Because it's that sense of control. I need to have control over the future that makes us feel so uncertain in the present.
And trigger your anxiety. Yeah. So basically breathe, drink Tetleys.
For the Brits out there, yeah. I don't know if that will help in
be in the present, stay in alignment.
Yeah. Reach out.
Yoga.
Talk about it. Maybe not in that moment, but talk about it. Give it normalization. Know that it's okay. Know that you're okay. You're not weird, because we're all feeling it. No one's weird for feeling this stuff. I thought that I was a bit strange for a long time. And the more I spoke to people, the more I realized that although a lot of people put on this front of everything great.
I think it's weird if people don't have things nowadays, almost.
I think it's weird. I was like, you know, who are you if you're walking around going everything's fantastic? Like, which world are you living in? Because it's
toxic,
not.
You know what? Toxic positivity.
Yeah. Yeah. And it feels like that. And I tell you why it's toxic as well, because it just makes the other person feel like they're not okay. The more that we can be real with, you know, yeah, I suffer sometimes, I get depressed sometimes, I feel anxious sometimes, it's hard sometimes, I get overwhelmed. The more that we can be honest about that, the more other people can feel honest about that, and not feel like there's some strange person that, you know, and everyone else is just happy. You know, like sort of on Facebook, it looks like everyone's living these sort of plastic perfect lives, and you're just like,
no, yeah,
doesn't make sense to me. So, or maybe they are, and I really am strange, I don't know.
Do you know what? I think everybody has something. That's what I've learned. Everybody has something. Yeah. And chances are that they're probably people are putting things up on social media on the days that they are feeling better and they are feeling good and things are okay on those days. But that doesn't mean that, like, behind the scenes something's not going on. Everyone has something. Right. Everyone has something.
Right. Yeah.
Suzy, do you have, to wrap up, do you have a message for the people that are watching this and still have that shame? That, like, they still feel the shame and taboo of anxiety. Do you have a message?
Definitely. I think, you know, just remember that you're okay, and remember that it's normal, and don't think for a second that even when it feels too much, that you can't cope, because you can, and you can reach out, and there is support, and so many more people today, especially so many people are willing to help, and I think are willing to be open. Maybe not so much in a public forum, because that can be a bit scary. And even now, as I'm doing this, I feel a bit like, oh my God, you know, people are going to see this. But it's okay as well, because what is there to, you know, especially as I'm getting older, well, what do I have to hide? Why do I need to hide something that's so normal and so real, to put on some fake smile and pretend it's always wonderful? Because life's not meant to be always wonderful. So just remember, you're not meant to be perfect, and it's okay that you're not perfect. And I think it's all the messages that I tell myself. It's okay. Breathe a lot.
And drink
breathe
tea.
Deeply. Drink tea if that helps, or find the anchor for you.
Drink hot.
Yeah. Run, move your body, even jump up and down, get the energy out of your body. But yeah, just get it out somehow. Any way that you can just get that energy out in that moment, so then you can get centered enough to process it, is I would really advise.
Definitely.
And
Suzy, thank you so much. Really
Pleasure.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much for joining us.
Pleasure.
And really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a great